Hey everybody, welcome back to the weekly podcast. My name is Patrick Tan. I'm the General Counsel for ChatArgos. We are the blockchain intelligence firm that was made famous for outing Binance's $1.4 billion BUSD under collateralization. With me every week, as usual, our CEO, Chief Data Scientist, Jonathan Reiter. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for all the feedback. We do appreciate it. And we've got interesting stuff for you this week. I have to admit, we're going to talk about Avalanche-C and the increase in activity on that blockchain. I know the block export for Avalanche-C is supposed to be down. It was supposed to.
There's new stuff.
Yeah, so there's new stuff. So it's still around, but we'll talk a little bit about that. That'll be fleeting commentary at best. We'll talk a little bit about Celsius, Tether, and Bitfinex because you guys have been asking a lot about that stuff that we tweeted about. We'll go into a little bit more, well, I wouldn't say a lot of detail, but we'll just, give you a quick overview on what that stuff is. John's going to get technical with us, talking to you about Bitcoin Ordinals. No, it's not a team. It's not a sports team. It's a technical subject. So, batten down the hatches and strap in because it'll be a ride. And then finally, there is bonus material if you listen all the way to the very end. And surprise, surprise, it involves Russia. It involves KYC. That's all I can say. Listen to the end and you'll get that bonus material. So let's just quickly go through Avalanche-C activity. We know that stablecoin activity on the Avalanche-C Chain has gone up by 5 to 7 times what the other stablecoin activity is on Ethereum or BNB Smart Chain for that matter. So
it started.
The growth has just been off the charts. What's going on?
Okay, so it's being used more in some sense, right? There's more transactions. That's fine. There's a long history of sort of activity appearing in some new place, stablecoin activity, and sometimes it turns out to be a sustainable business, and sometimes it flares up and then it goes back to nothing. I guess we're going to find out. We're having another go at that process. There's a reasonable amount of activity for a long time now on Ethereum, on BNB Smart Chain, and on Tron, and the amount of activity on BNB Smart Chain did drop after the BUSD ending because that was the main stablecoin on BNB Smart Chain. And
not our fault.
There's still some action there, but it's a lower level than it was then. Tether's never been big on BNB Smart Chain. So whether Avalanche is going to prove to be the sort of next place for a lot of this stuff to run, I know a few people do projects there, whatever. There's a fair amount of action in that space, but the history of, just like the history of whoever banks Tether and whatnot has not been fantastic. The history of places where there's a large amount of stablecoin activity quickly out of nowhere tend not to be fantastic. I guess we'll find out what happens with these services. Or that's just a new DeFi ecosystem that's finally going to start blooming. It's something to watch. It's interesting, and usually this kind of phenomenon ends badly. Sooner or later, whatever. That's not a price prediction. That's I guess we'll find out. It's I guess it's nice there's more places for us to look at because we have this system. We might as well use it. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so switching gears, we're going to talk a little bit about the Celsius tweet that we did. So let's just go.
So this is based off work that Mike Burgersberg.
Oh yes, correct. Yeah. So I was going to attribute him. Okay. Yeah, this is work based off Mike Burgersberg's article. You can go and check it out. It's on our Twitter feed. So I'll go through. Number one, Celsius had a large loan of USDT collateralized by BTC. In June 2022, Celsius went bankrupt. In June 2022, a large long BTC position suddenly showed up on Bitfinex. Shout out to No Crypt Fish. In June 2022 as well, Tether's auditors removed the none to affiliated entities line from their attestations. Shout out to Crypto Inferno. I think that's how you pronounce it. In September 23, Tether said that they were extending loans so that their customers could, quote, potentially to avoid potentially unfavorable prices. Shout out to Cryptodamus who provided us with that information. Celsius loan payments seem like they might have been taken up by someone with a Bitfinex account. That's our quoted tweet. So if you look at some of the charts that we have on X, now it's called X, you can see like regular hiving off of payments.
Yeah, well, okay. So Mike Burgersberg was given some information.
From a source.
Yeah, some addresses that are associated with Celsius's Tether loans. We know these loans exist because, among other things, they're in documentation. Fine. So when you look at those addresses, you see what do absolutely look like, regular interest payments and loans, things like that. And then that gives you a pattern, and you can start to look in different places and try to find more loans and things that look similar. If you look at balances and quantities flowing through these addresses, it's got the nice sort of stepping up in a linear fashion that you would expect. If I borrow money at 5% and I pay it back, monthly coupons, annual 5%, the total amount I pay is just going to step up linearly over time. That's exactly what you would expect this to look like. It's what we see. And we also see, you can tell, sender receiver addresses, it's all public, and a lot of stuff moving over to Bitfinex associated addresses, payments in and out. Loan novation, don't know. Celsius is going through a bankruptcy procedure, so there shouldn't be payments happening out of those entities.
So for the avoidance of doubt, when a company goes bankrupt, you can't keep making payments out of the bankrupt, the company that's undergoing bankruptcy proceedings. So what did this look?
Well, you're not supposed to.
You're not supposed to.
Mechanically,
yeah. I mean, mechanically, I don't know, but you're not supposed to. So what this kind of looks like is that possibly, right, this is a theory, that rather than immediately liquidate Celsius's BTC collateral, it looks as if Bitfinex may have assumed the loan and started slowly selling off the collateral and making the payments that Celsius would have had it not gone bust, which is strange.
Well, okay. Strange. So it's not strange in that this is the correct way to deal with liquidating collateral. I mean, somebody defaults on a mortgage, you buy the house, you take the house and you auction it off, you get a bunch of securities, you sell them. If you can sell them quickly and just get the money, you do that. If it's a huge amount and you can't, you sell them slowly. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the strategy of finding somebody to take over the defaulted loan and let that person liquidate the collateral slowly.
You can sell the loan at a discount.
However, this is not supposed to be what's happening here. So now it's not Tether itself or whatever. It may or may not be. It looks as though an affiliate may have taken over a defaulted loan position, kept current on the loan, and then unwound the collateral slowly over time. From an economic perspective, it doesn't look like there's anything wrong here.
Yes.
And everything looks exactly as you would expect if this was a regular procedure and somebody got a bunch of securities, they sell slowly, whatever. What's weird is that this is not the described process, right? It's consistent with the observations from these tweets about the auditor's comments changing slightly, whatever, positions moving from place to place, but it's not consistent with the described process and the statements. And if you come out and say, we liquidated a customer and we had no losses, that's not supposed to mean the loan was transferred to a different affiliate who's still making the payments and selling the collateral slowly. It implies that you've cleared things and moved forward. Is that a lie? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It depends exactly what transaction occurred. Is it confusing and misleading? Yes. Is that surprising for this space?
No.
Not at all. But it's interesting that as we get more and more information, we're really starting to be able to piece together what's really been happening. And as I've been saying for almost 2 years now, most of the time you're going to find that people were not outright lying to you. They were saying things that they intended to be interpreted in a way that you could probably never have guessed. But what they said was almost, if not technically quite there, true, right? So we liquidated this loan by transferring the collateral to a different affiliate that is now making, is not a lie. A lot of things are going to start to make a lot more sense as this onion gets,
peeled back.
Yeah.
So, okay, now, because this is quite a big topic to cover, Bitcoin Ordinals, very technical, kind of dry, but...
Okay, so there is a debate, explosion, dispute, argument, whatever, in the Bitcoin space right now, which is interesting. So some of this extends back early days, semi-early days. Bitcoin has a smart contract language. It's a very limited smart contract language. It's not a convenient place to build DeFi services, but you can do things. There's actually a paper from about a decade ago written by Craig Wright explaining that the Bitcoin scripting language is in fact Turing complete. He's correct. But so you can write any program you want in it, but it may take a catastrophically long amount of time to run. Anyway, associated with the fact that Bitcoin isn't just a payment service, it contains other scripting and computer whatever functionality, there are limitations people started to put on what you could do with it. By people, I mean the developers of the
core
core
developers,
node.
yeah.
The protocol itself, certainly you go back to the white paper, the protocol itself doesn't cover any of this kind of stuff. And as is normally the case, the implementation has a little more flowery stuff on the side than the core basic protocol allows, handles. The paper doesn't, the original Bitcoin paper doesn't deal with this stuff. And then there were, discussions over time about a consensus on what the maximum amount of data that has to be kept is and what are and are not prunable from the tree, whatever. Various state issues. Fine, matter. So what's happening now, this thing called Ordinals came out a little while ago. And the idea here is that the minimum amount you can transfer on Bitcoin is 1 Satoshi. So that's 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin, which is not worth much money. And, even into the reasonably foreseeable future, in the most bullish possible scenario, 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin is unlikely to be worth a huge amount of money. And instead, there were ways of encoding data in the Bitcoin blockchain where you could associate particular Satoshis with some other thing. So sort of like you think of NFTs as having either a link to a website or actually JPEG data or whatever, you could do something like that here. Now that generated a tremendous amount of volume. People may remember from a few months ago that the chain was clogged. There were very, very high fees, whatever, miners having difficulty. Okay. Now, one of the large mining pools, and I guess he's their chief developer or whatever, a guy who's been involved in developing Bitcoin software for a long time, has asserted that this entire Ordinals thing, this way of storing data that's not transaction data, is just exploiting a flaw in the controls that were put into the system starting something like 10 years ago when these issues began. And if this person is able to get that set of changes accepted into all of the major mining pools and whatever consensus software writer, deployer type people, it will kind of eliminate this Ordinals, this NFT-like thing from the protocol by having most nodes just forget about it. Right. On a somewhat more technical level, they're talking about limiting the amount of data that you can put in a certain place. And if you set that limit to a really small number, you can no longer record much of anything there. This would delete a lot of what people thought was immutable economic activity on the Bitcoin chain. I find this amusing because, of course, it's software written by people and people can decide to change things any way they want, and if the vast majority of them decide this data is not important, this data is getting deleted, right? It's not immutable in that sense. Fine. So all of this, the discussion and using this data and all these pointers, all that went back to work that was done years ago that led to the Lightning Network, other things, trying to scale Bitcoin. The idea was that you'd need to find ways to associate various types of data with a limited amount of on-chain bandwidth, and the common solution people started to point to then was to simply post a hash. So hash codes are much shorter summaries of big blobs of data, and the idea was we don't have to allow a big fancy scripting language and huge amounts of data, just one little slice, publish a hash, fine. The problem, of course, is that there's no way to do that trustlessly, so you have to trust the guy with the private key that submitted the hash to keep track of the thing that's over here. And this goes back to the sort of impossibility of trustless transacting on-chain versus off-chain. That impossibility is rearing its head again. The most recent attempt to deal with this issue, instead of posting hashes of external data, is L2, roll-up, scaling solution, whatever, which all seem to end up involving some kind of a trusted custodian in the middle. So it's funny that that's continuing to be a problem, and someone has decided they don't even want to support this in their mining pool anymore. It's one of the larger mining pools. So they're going to try to have the stuff purged from the system. That is it is interesting. It is interesting. It's not even like it's a protocol fork exactly. You're making a decision about how much data can go in a certain place and be considered part of the canonical chain or not. I don't want to get into an existential debate about if that's a protocol change or not, but it's something more like a grayer area, and it's going to be very interesting to watch a social consensus process where everyone that's built anything that depends on this feature is clearly going to want it to stay around. And there are people who have now very publicly said they do not want it to stay around, some of whom are associated with a large mining company.
Yeah,
so, this is not like the block size wars because there was not much historical vested interest.
Yeah.
Here you're actually talking about wiping out. If somebody went in, a big Ethereum miner said, ERC20s are wrong, let's just delete them, right? You can imagine, nobody's suggesting that's mechanically possible here, but sorry. That would have huge implications for anybody that had built something on an ERC20 token, right? Removing ordinals from the system is that kind of level of change. So it will be very interesting to watch that one. A lot of the debate is happening among quite technically capable or aware people, so it may not make that much sense, some of the Twitter stuff going back and forth, because they tend to be reasonably technical arguments. It's interesting. Yeah.
So to be fair, right, with the block size wars, I guess the stakes weren't as high simply because not as many people had built stuff
Those
at
were
the time.
different solutions to fix problems going forward.
And it was a different time as well. But the whole space just really wasn't as developed as it is today. Now what you're saying is that basically, okay, we went with the city grid, which had all the pipes and all the electrical wiring underneath the roads. Let's rip up all the roads, take everything out, screw the buildings atop all of this stuff. No. The buildings don't matter.
That's right. Now, whether any of that stuff was really heavily used or not, whatever.
Doesn't
but
matter.
You have a situation where a fair amount of historical vested interest is, and this would definitely show that things that people believed were immutable on this ledger forever are not, and were not.
Immutable becomes an extremely plastic concept the minute you start doing stuff like that.
They were muted.
Yes, and that's interesting.
Yeah.
And remember how everybody always says that Bitcoin is one of the most immutable blockchains as opposed to Ethereum because it's centrally controlled, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada.
This will mute
This will mute it, yeah. So
as we discussed when Circle had those financing problems at Silicon Valley Bank, it is extremely hard to restore people's faith in things like that. So,
you do something like that.
Yeah.
And
even having the discussion is interesting. At least the DAO hack, where stuff was changed retroactively, was relatively quick after the event, and there was some discussion, and while it was out of protocol forking whatever procedure, it was at least quick. This is not quick, and the guy who's spearheading it actually said something like, I've been busy the last couple months, I'm back, and this is an exploit we're going to delete. Okay, game on, right?
And then he said that I'm going to go take a nap now, and I'll get back to you when I'm ready to
That's a different hacker.
All right, okay, moving up. Finally, bonus material. Okay, you guys may not know about this, but Transparency International Russia recently did a whole piece not too long ago talking about how you could buy verified accounts to access WireX. So WireX, if you're not familiar, is actually one of the many ways that you can do like crypto to fiat currency bridges.
They're a pretty big crypto payment processor. It's been around for
they've been around for
10 years, whatever. Yeah. And
so long story short, you can go at these reporters from, researchers from Transparency International. They want to go and try out and see, is it possible to buy verified accounts that can access WireX? Just happened to be the one that they were looking to buy for, but there are tons of other accounts that they can buy. And then there were prices, like if you wanted to buy these things, the sellers would usually ask like, okay, send the USDT on Tron network to these addresses. If you want Czech Republic, I recall, was reasonably expensive.
You could buy KYC accounts
verified
for different nationalities, different residents, whatever, some refugees, all kinds of stuff.
And the pricing thing was interesting because like Czech Republic, I remember, was like $250 or something like that. If you wanted a Ukrainian refugee is like $20-$30. The pricing itself is a bit jarring because just to look at that kind of thing. But whatever the case may be, you could get Slovakia, Latvian, some Spain as well. Verified accounts.
I think those were resident permit. Yeah. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's a long document.
So you can go. But what's I think interesting is that you had the payment accounts, the ones that received those payments.
So they published the addresses for I think it was 5 or 6 different services, along with something like their price lists and the names of the services
and the Tron addresses. So obviously, we would
stick them in the system,
stick those addresses in the system, and guess what? We found they received the amounts in denominations and multiples of some of these things. So like you see accounts like where somebody bought obviously 2 Czech Republic accounts because it was like $440 and stuff like that, and you see that throughout, and it's so obvious, and it's all in the system. We might publish some of those findings in the coming days and weeks.
They're not colossal amounts of money.
No,
they are meaningful amounts of money.
Yes.
What's interesting is that they've got, I would consider their reporting to be proof, whatever, that these services are a thing that's real. And again, just like we were talking about a few minutes ago with the Celsius Tether loans, once you see how the thing works, oh, okay, we're looking for accounts that have payments in multiples of $30 or $50, and the individual transfers are normally for 3 to 5 times that amount, a couple times a week. You can start to find lots of these services, and it helps you have a better understanding of how prevalent this stuff is in the ecosystem. Similarly, they publish the names and addresses of specific services. You know that whoever's working with those services is probably associated with some stuff that's not going to go well. So you'd be interested to see if they were associated with any custodians, exchanges, whatever, things like that. No one's suggesting that Wirex did anything wrong, or even that an exchange that onboarded somebody with bought Wirex, whatever, verified account status deposits, whether they were doing anything wrong either. But something wrong happened, and you're going to need to figure that one out. We have no information about the level of the verified accounts or how this stuff is created. But if you were to, for example, find that a lot of this stuff was ending up at, a small number, whatever, of exchanges frequently, you would probably have questions about how well their procedures worked and how well documented stuff was. Probably not great. It's interesting. Anyway, we're starting to really be able to see on the ground concrete examples of bad service providers. I mean,
well, the good service providers, it's just that the service that they provide is illegal.
I guess they're good at their job. We say this a lot. So it will start to make it easier to answer questions like how much of this activity is not okay. Selling verified accounts from Ukrainian refugees with Spanish residence permits is straight up illegal, and there's no gray area about that, and you'll lose your money transmitter licenses and whatnot. And there's no gray area in that one. Okay, we can start to answer questions about how much of this is, how much of the activity is these kinds of things. Once we know what it looks like, the rate is going to go up over time. It's not going to end at 100%, but we're going to have a much better sense for what's going on the more of these things we find.
And on that note, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you for watching. We'll see you again next week. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.